It's turning, and then we are live. Excellent. All right. All right, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Future Proof You podcast for Working Dad. And today I'm really excited to have Jay Abbasi with us. Jay, we just had a chat beforehand. I met Jay through LinkedIn, as you do, and I was just so attracted to him because of him sharing about his wake-up call with his dad and sharing his engagement, his involvement with his daughter, and then mindfulness. I'm like, okay, all of this, I need to have him on the podcast. How are you doing, Jay?
I'm doing really well, Julian, and thank you for having me on. I'm, a dad is one of the first things I say that I am. So I appreciate the work that you do, and I'm just happy to have a nice conversation with you.
Awesome. Yes, that's all goal. Have a conversation. So you're from New Jersey, and you really focus on mindfulness, and you focus on getting rid of burnout in corporates and then for individuals. Can you tell us more about what you do and introduce us to your family as well?
Absolutely, Julian. I'd be happy to. So in terms of what I do, it was a journey that took me a few years to get to this point where the practice of mindfulness was something that helped me get through some of the most difficult moments in my life. So you alluded to it earlier. I lost my dad years ago, and it was a sudden loss. He had a heart attack, and he wasn't sick or anything. He just had a heart attack. And I had, two elder sisters, my mother who was grieving, my daughter was 2 at the time, and I was married at the time. So I had to step up and be the man, right? And take care.
Yep. That's what we expected to do, right?
Right, exactly. And so I had to grow up in an instant. There wasn't a choice. I had to grow up or I had to crumble. And in seeking out ways to manage through that, I found mindfulness. And it had such an impact on me to where over the years, I was able to excel professionally. I joined Tesla, and I worked at Tesla and excelled there, and I did well. And I'd say it's mainly due to the skill of self-observation that I developed from the mindfulness practice. And then this year, about a year removed from Tesla, I decided to make a pivot in my business and support organizations and individuals that are struggling with burnout, with high turnover rates at companies, and people who just need a little bit of help in staying motivated and bouncing back from the challenges like we're facing right now in this global pandemic through the understanding and the practice of mindfulness. And personally, my family, I'm father to an 8-year-old daughter. Her name is Amelia, and just put her to bed actually because it's an evening here. And I'm divorced, but I have a girlfriend right now of whom I'm it's very a wonderful relationship, and I'm very blessed to say my ex-wife and I are good friends.
Nice. So you still have a good relationship with it. So when it's not awkward when when you drop off Amelia, right?
Right, and we co-parent, Julian. So it's something we found balance where with homeschooling, right? Because of COVID, there are some days where she watches Amelia the whole day, even at my house. And we work something out. And then at times I'll bring Amelia to her. Sometimes she'll bring Amelia to me. We just have this, it's like a partnership of friends who realize that this is a better way to do it than marriage, because the marriage relationship wasn't best for both of us.
Yeah. So how does it work with isolation? Like, does your ex-wife lives in the same neighborhood still, or like, can you drive out there? Like, how does it work?
Yeah, so she's about a 25-minute drive, and things have relaxed a bit in New Jersey to where we can leave, and the curfews have been lifted. So I can drive, she can drive, and that's not really too much of a challenge anymore. When things were at its height and there was, isolation, it wasn't really recommended for Amelia to leave. So her mom would come and visit. It ended up being, as you know, we all ended up getting infected in my household. Fortunately, blessed to say we're all okay, but we managed through it. And I'd say that we still have a pretty good situation right now.
So, you hinted at the fact, when your dad passed away, you had to grow up and be the man. And when you just said, like the entire family got infected, how did you be the man in that situation? Like, how did you, lead your daughter 8 years old through, you're infected with COVID, yes, that's the stuff that we see people dying on TV from.
Yeah. It's actually, now that you put it that way, it was similar, right? I mean, obviously there wasn't grief of losing a loved one, but having to face that challenge and then be able to stand tall and manage through those emotions, that was very similar, right? So I would say mindfulness was my saving grace, Julian.
Yeah.
And it was mainly because of the psychological impacts that one could have. So I'll walk you through a quick story. So when I was starting to feel the symptoms, I was aware of it. I was feeling it, but it got to a point, Julian, where I couldn't complete a full sentence without feeling out of breath. Yeah.
Okay.
And the chest pain was so severe. It was unlike anything I've ever felt. It felt like there were rocks in my lungs or something like that, like burning coal kind of. And so when I realized I needed to get checked out, and the doctors at that time told me, look, with your daughter, because I was, on the phone, with your daughter, she most likely has it at this point. So don't change your behavior with her because you wouldn't want to scare her. But children tend to not show any symptoms and they get through fine. But I remember the day that I was going to go to the hospital, I gave her a hug. And I remember hugging her and the thought crossing my mind, is this the last time I'm going to hug my daughter? It was scary. It was scary. And then this is where mindfulness comes in.
Yeah.
I realized the thought for what it was. I became aware of it. And rather than feed it, because that's often what we do, we feed that fear. We let it go. What if this is the last time I'm going to see her? Oh my God, I'm not going to survive this. Blah, blah, blah. And that's when the panic starts to happen. I realized in that moment, Julian, that wouldn't serve me and that wouldn't serve her and it wouldn't serve any of the people around me. So once I realized that, I then asked myself questions such as, well, do I know this to be factually true?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, the answer was no. So what do I know right now? I know that I'm feeling these symptoms. I most likely have this disease. What else do I know? I also know that somebody who's healthy, such as myself, who is in great shape, fairly young, I am not really at risk considering I have no issues with my lungs and breathing. I will be okay. Mm-hmm. So therefore, I can let go of this fear. Now, it doesn't mean like that it went away.
No.
Right. But it helped to manage through it, right? And then at some point, obviously, in front of my family, I was always very strong and I showed that I'm going to be all right. But I remember I got my girlfriend on the phone and I'm not ashamed to say this. I cried. I cried like a baby. I had to let it out. I had to. The emotions were there. And I felt like if I didn't, I would be just suppressing it down. And so I let it out. And then by letting it out, I was able to let it go. And then from there, I was able to not let the psychological impact influence my health. Because right? Stress is something that only causes the disease to get worse, right? We lose our defense. So I'd say that, I know that was a very long-winded answer, but I would say that's a good way to summarize how mindfulness came to be my saving grace when I was infected with COVID.
And so how do you see the difference? Because it feels like you've been able to implement it super quickly because it kind of came through practice. How was it different from when you lost your dad? Like, how long did that take for you to recover from that? And like, compared to this time around where it was not instantaneous, but, much quicker.
Yeah, Julian, I appreciate this thought of connecting those dots because I think it does tell the journey really well. I would say it was much more difficult back then. I would say also, of course, the loss of a loved one is a harder thing to go through for anyone, right? I think that's just a fair thing to acknowledge. However, without having developed a practice and the skill of self-observation, it was much more of a roller coaster, and I was harder to let go. I guess that's the easiest way to describe it. It was harder to let go. And so what mindfulness has done for me and what the practice does of just basically as simple as just focusing our attention on the present moment objectively, right, with acceptance, which is ultimately what mindfulness does. I was able to this time around not get so caught into the emotion. Like I like to think of it like this, Julian. Imagine you're going into a lake, you're walking into a lake and your feet get wet and you keep going. Now it's up to your knees and now it goes up to your waist and now it's up to your neck. And you finally get into the lake and you're this far into the lake and you're like, oh my God, How'd I get here? But you're already soaked. You're in the middle of the lake. That's probably what it was like for me. I'd say close back in 2014 when this happened with my father. With COVID, it was like I walked in and maybe it got up to my calf and I noticed it. And I was like, oh, I'm getting wet. And I decided to walk out.
Oh, okay. You decided to walk out. Okay.
Yeah.
It's funny because this analogy talks to me because I swim in the ocean every morning. And for me, like the moment where I go into the water, this is a moment where I'm present in the water, right? Like it's that moment where my head goes underwater and I don't see the outside environment. I see the undersea environment. That's a moment where, well, I start my gratitude journal, but I feel like, wow, I'm alive. So I'm really, so what you just described, I can really relate to this. It's super powerful. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, I think with the analogy that I was describing is more of the lake being the lake of fear, emotion, right?
Right. In that case, it's a lake of fear. Yes.
In that context, right?
Yeah. So you've talked about mindfulness and self-observation, and I think like going through crisis helped us. I'll put myself in that in that bucket. Through losing someone or almost losing someone, that woke us up. But what about other dads, like who we don't have that motivation straight away to start on a mindfulness journey because we haven't had that crisis just yet? But how can dads start on that journey with like specific tools, like specific ways of starting that are not scary, that are not fluffy? I think that's the word that you use.
Yeah. And I think that there's often this stigma behind mindfulness that it is fluffy, and that it's, the person in the robe floating in a cave or something. And I don't think it has to be that way. I think the real reason you should, well, I guess we start with this. The person who wants to look into this has to want to, right? They have to have this desire within them. So why would you do this anyway? Why would mindfulness and why would that practice of developing the skill of self-observation be something that you want to do? Well, first, of course, you have to look inside yourself to determine if this is something for you. But I would encourage anyone to understand this concept, which is there is only one way to change yourself. There's only one way to improve yourself, and it's through you. That's a fact. There's nothing else. I just posted about this today. You cannot have anybody else change you. And I think that's not even opinion. That's fact, right? Only I can change me. Only Julian can change Julian. It's just the way it works. So knowing that, if you want to change, what I mean by change is to change the results that you have in your life. If you want to behave differently, think differently, get different results, you have to have the ability to look within and be able to observe what's happening. Otherwise, you are going about your days without really having an understanding of how you operate. Yes. So once we have that fundamental, I consider it fundamental understanding of how we operate through the skill of self-observation, we can then make honest change. We can make real change to how we are behaving, to the words that we say, to the way that we feel, to how we think and our belief systems and our perceptions. All of that is required to be changed in order for you to get a different result. So if there anyone who's listening, if you're hoping to get a different result from life than what you currently have, whatever that is, whatever that result is, it starts with changing you. How to change you is by going within. So some of the tools and practical ways in which you can do this is by developing a practice. And there's so many out there. There isn't a one size fits all. There isn't a here's how one meditates or how one practices mindfulness. There are many different tools. I could spend hours talking about it, but I don't want to bore everyone. So I would say start with something small. Don't go in trying to meditate for an hour if it's your first time. Sit for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, quietly, and just observe. Observe your breathing. Observe your body. Observe whatever comes to you naturally. And there's so many different guided ways in which one can find this practice, but just do it for 2 minutes and see what happens. And it's not going to be perfect the first time you do it. That's okay. But just make a commitment to yourself that if I want to make a change, I know I have to look at myself. So I need to find a practice and I need to do it consistently every day to be able to make it become more habitual.
like it's not a chore anymore. And I remember when I started doing it, I had so many thoughts racing through, like it was just going through, and I felt like I think it was the first 10 times I felt, oh, I failed my meditation because I read the book and he said, you should think about nothing, but I kept thinking about things.
I'm going to jump in on that because I feel you and I understand and I've been there. But I have a 3-step process for how to go approach a meditation. And it's a simple way of remembering it by just remembering the name Ian, I-A-N. And Ian stands for intention, attention, and non-judgment. So when we go to practice meditation, we have to have an intention, not an expectation. There's a difference in what those two things mean. Intention is, I intend to get some insight into myself. I intend to be more calm. I intend to be present. Whatever is the intention, have it set in your mind. This is my intention. And I don't have an expectation that it's going to happen. I'm not clinging to the idea that in order for me to feel like I did this well, I need to have experienced this or that, because it's outside of our control to some extent. And then the second is, of course, attention. And with attention, what I was just saying before about your breath, about your body, whatever it is, just focus your attention on the present moment, right? That's the idea of the practice, is attention. However, you're going to get distracted. Like you just said, your mind's racing.
Yes.
Right? It's always going to happen. It happens to me. It happens to everybody. What you have to do is just remember to keep bringing your attention back to whatever it is your focal point is. And here's the thing. Here's what's fascinating about this, Julian. Every time you do that, it's like a bicep curl at the gym. Every time you got distracted and you realized it and you brought it back, what the science shows is you're starting to make that connection in your brain from the prefrontal cortex to the other areas of the brain because you're using it. If you didn't recognize it, you wouldn't, then that's an evidence that you didn't use it. But if you recognized it and you brought it back, that in itself is what's rewiring your brain. And then the third, non-judgment, is you can't get mad at yourself for that happening. You can't go in saying, I'm bad, I'm not doing this right, I'm not getting anything out of this. You just have to go in with the mindset of, I'm accepting what is, I have equanimity, I am allowing whatever to happen, and I'm not judging myself for the result.
Oh, I love it. It just brings back so many memories. There was also another part of judgment in there because I started doing it when I was doing my PhD about 6 years ago. And I was doing it because I found myself not being able to focus on my writing because we do so much freaking writing. And every 2 hours I needed to have a break. And I found that having like a 10 minutes meditation really helped me refocus on my writing.
Right.
And at first, I started to go outside, sit on a bench, hide from all my peers. And then after a while, I'm like, F that. I'm just going to do it from my desk in front of my computer because I was doing it so many times. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, what is going to be the judgment of others when they see me doing it, right? And because, you're like, do I have my headset somewhere? Like my big blue headset on there, and like closing my eyes and being straight back, like. And after a while, I realized I actually don't care what they think because it's helping me so much to focus on my writing. And then what happens is that actually people, they started making fun at first, and then they started asking me, why are you doing it and how are you doing it?
Right. Isn't that fascinating? It piques the curiosity of others. And I would say that, Julian, what's also fascinating about what you shared is the judgment or the thought in your mind that there are others that are judging you is in itself a practice of mindfulness, because you can become more aware of it, right? You can see that this is where my mind's going. It's thinking about what other people might be thinking and how they feel about me, and am I being judged, and am I going to feel rejected? And you can see that too. Like that's what's so powerful about the practice is anything that you experience can be observed. And when it is observed, then it no longer controls us.
Yes. I love to go back to your why, because that's something that like is so important for on this show and for all dads. And my motto is life is good when you future-proof you, then future-proof your family, then future-proof your business, right? And you just said only you can change you, right? So we are the only one who can future-proof ourselves. We can't expect our boss. We can't expect even our wives to change us. It really starts with us. So it's really about us to start realizing we have to do something and we have to change something. And so you said, meditation, 2 minutes, it's one way to get started. But not everyone feel able to start with, sitting on a cushion and listening to a guided meditation. And so when I interviewed other guys, some of them were saying, I find my meditation in walking in the forest, doing, in being in the gym, exercises. What's your take on doing meditation that way?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, Julian, I don't think there's a one size fits all. I don't think that there's only the 2-minute meditation. Now, here's my, I'm going to challenge it a little bit, and not because not to the point where I think it's wrong or anything. It's just, I want you to imagine if you're trying to get into good physical shape, right?
Yep.
If I were to tell you, hey, one way to get into physical shape is to, instead of driving to, let's say, the convenience store, you can walk there, right? That's actually really good. That's one healthy way. That's like the example of what you mentioned, walking out in nature, when you're doing other activities, being mindful. I think that's phenomenal. It's fantastic. But what's the best way to be in physical shape? Have a routine, an exercise routine, that you go to the gym 3-4 times a week and you're actually lifting weights, or you're doing cardio, or you're doing something regularly. And that's the fastest way to develop the skill, or I should say develop yourself physically. But I would say I equate that to meditation, a formal practice, because that is what's going to fast track one to the skill of self-observation. Now, having said that, I don't want to discredit what you mentioned a moment ago. I think there's value to it. I do it every day. I go out for what I call a mindful walk. And my mindful walk, we need to be careful, because some people hear that and think, oh, okay, so just go out for a walk. And no, not exactly.
Eat and listen to music. Yes.
Right, yeah, that's not it, right? It's when you are observing, whether it's every step you take, the feeling of lifting your leg and moving it to the next place, and lifting your next, and observing every motion, that wind hitting your face, your arms moving, and you're being very aware of it. And you could do that internally the way I just described. I also think you could do it externally by looking at nature and observing the wind go through the leaves of a tree, and the sounds of the birds that are chirping near you. All of that is a way in which one can informally practice mindfulness without sitting on a cushion. And I think, again, there's value to it, but I still believe having a routine is the way in which one truly develops the skill of self-observation.
I totally agree. I mean, like, it's going back to, Atomic Habit from James Clear, right? I think you make a key point here. He says, well, it's not about how long you've been doing it. It's like how many times, like the frequency. So if you do it on a daily basis, then you're really building that habit, and it becomes natural. And for me, like I started meditating every morning. I started 3 times a week, and then I was doing it at work, and then I realized, when you have kids, it's get harder and harder. So I started doing it first thing in the morning when I wake up. And then I started swimming in the ocean because I busted my knee and I need to get better.
Yeah.
And what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to do swimming, and then I'm going to do it on the beach. I'm going to do my 10 minutes meditation on the beach, which was awesome. But then by putting goggles on when snorkeling, and I snorkel in a natural reserve, there's just fish everywhere. I started just looking at the fish, like giving them names, like noting them, and being so into the fish and the life underwater that I realized I was already meditating. But when I got to the beach and sat down and meditated, I'm like, poof, like level 10.
Right. No, that's fascinating what you did. That's fascinating, Julian. It's amazing. I think that, what what ends up happening is that when you start to develop that routine, you start to find other moments in the other ways in which you can experience being in that meditative state, like seeing a fish and being in water. I know that for me, I can't now cut a banana without being completely present. It's funny. I developed it now every time because I have oatmeal almost every day. I'm very ritualistic when it comes to my food. I always cut up half a banana. And the reason I have this is because I went on a meditation retreat 2 years ago, and that was mentioned by one of the teachers who said, when you're, if you're slicing a banana, let that be a meditative practice, right? So now every time I slice that banana, I notice exactly how it feels. And I'm observing the knife go through, and I'm just watching it. And what's really interesting is that one can find in their daily routine. So this is another like practical tip, right? Find little things like this, little moments where you can always let that be your moment to be present. Whether that's washing your hands, brushing your teeth, being in the shower. Like this doesn't require more of your time. It just requires a shift in your intention when you're going into what you're about to do. As I'm washing my hands, I'm going to let this be a time where I'm going to be present, and I'm going to use this as a meditation practice. And if you have that intention, then you go in with the attention and not judgment. That is in itself a practice, right?
Beautiful. I like it because to build those routines, we really need those triggers that already exist in our life. So you say, well, when we wash our hands, especially now, we're washing our hands all the time, it becomes so much more powerful. I like to, before we leave, I like to discuss another tool and see what you think of it, because you talk a lot about self-observation, and you said, looking at yourself, looking at what you think, and even looking at nature. What about writing a journal, or even here on LinkedIn, starting to do video reflections? What's your thoughts on that type of self-observation?
I looked back because I was hoping it was within reach, my journal, but it's actually no. I think that is just everything we've been talking about, Julian, is exactly the same thing. I think when words, I could talk about words for a while, but words tend to compartmentalize things, and they're a necessary tool in our society, right? But the word mindfulness, the word journaling, the word meditation, they're all ultimately saying the same thing, which is when we're focusing on the present moment with acceptance, right? When you're journaling, that's exactly what you're doing, right? You're gaining insight into yourself. You're there, you're present, and you're then observing and you're reflecting and you're just writing it down. That's the act itself, but it's a meditation practice in itself. And I find so much value in it. I find incredible value in journaling. I find incredible value in video creation as well. I would say, now that you have me thinking about it, that because I've been on LinkedIn as active on LinkedIn as I have been in the last few months, I have gotten more insights into myself than any other time, because I'm forcing it out of me, right? I want to create content. I then tell myself, okay, well, what do I want to talk about? What's important to me? I then go through the practice, right? And now like things are just coming out left and right.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. It's helpful. It's insightful. And from it, I gain so much value. I'm able to see how I operate, and in the same way I would when I meditate, through creating videos, through journaling. So I'm completely for it. I think it's an incredible value add to anyone who does it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Such a great way to end. So let's so what do you want to let the audience with, and what's your call to action? So that could be like, how do we follow you? So I'll say, follow Jay on LinkedIn, man. Like that. Your videos are awesome. But how else can we engage with you? And what is your final thoughts for the audience?
Yeah. So of course, LinkedIn, I think of LinkedIn as like another extended family, honestly. It's an amazing community. And my website is another point of which you can learn more about what I do. It's jayabbasi.me. And the website includes an insight into my online course, which is going to be coming out soon, which will give in the most simplest and basic understanding of mindfulness with tools to practice mindfulness for someone who hasn't ever been able to really get the practice going yet. So look out for that through my website. And I guess my final thoughts are that, and I've been saying this recently because it's come to mind from someone reminded me, Neil Donald Walsh said it, which is if we don't go within, then we go without. And I think that it's a powerful statement. It means a great deal to me, because if we are living our lives with the spotlight always out, and we're active and we're working and we're fathers and we're raising our kids and we're working you go to work, we're watching TV, we're doing all this stuff, and we never ever take some time to turn that spotlight around and look inside, our lives are going to pass us by like this. Give yourself that time. Give yourself that space. Because if you just take that spotlight and turn it back around and look inside, even for just a few minutes a day, like we've been talking about on this call or in this show, it will make all the difference in how you show up in the world, how you are as a father, how you are as a leader, how you are with the people in your life. You'll get different results simply by giving yourself those few minutes a day.
Wow. Can you say it again? Don't go within.
If you don't go within, you go without.
That's powerful. I think we have a show title. All right, thank you.
It's not my quote. I can't take credit for it. I heard it from Neil Donald Walsh, and I just wanted to share it with you all.
It's okay. It's okay. I'll put the reference. I'm an academic. I have to do the referencing. All right. Thank you so much, Jay. See ya.
You're welcome. Take care, Julian. Bye.
Now I click on end broadcast.